Okay, here we go. I think we're ready to start. And I want to welcome everyone. And I'm always a little slow to start because I want to make sure you can hear me. And I'm a little out of breath because I just ran through the house turning off all the telephones so we don't get interrupted. And I even remembered to turn the ringer off on my cell phone. So we're good there. Okay, hi everybody. Whew. We have stairs, and so now I'm out of breath. So welcome everybody, I'm Angela Fehr, and today we're going to, in this live video lesson, we're going to talk about brush handling techniques and the role they play in personal style. Looks like you guys can see me and hear me, and my hair isn't too sticky outy, so I think we're all good. That doesn't matter anyhow because you'll be looking at my hands for most of this lesson. I want to start in this series. We just started a new series last week, and I wanted to do a new video course for anybody who's really unfamiliar with what I do and how I teach. And so I've done that as a free course on my website at learn.angelafehr.com. Actually, you're not going to find it there if you go to the site, just because I'm in the process now of rebuilding it. And so I thought it would be a great opportunity in these classes on YouTube to prepare that content and then hopefully be able to package that for my free course. So you guys are getting the test audience for this content that I'm sharing, although some of it you'll have heard before because it's really a repeating theme through what I teach. So what I'm going to do is just share some thoughts and this stuff. While I know you all want to watch me paint, these thoughts that I'm sharing are just as important, because really I think with the right mindset we're going to grow faster, we're going to be less likely to get discouraged and give up, and hopefully we'll understand our role in watercolor and our own personal style just a little bit better. So I want to encourage you guys to be thinking about that as I talk, as much as I know you're waiting for me to start painting. I'm just going to switch my screen over so I can read some of the thoughts that I've written down so that hopefully I sound articulate. One thing I want you to know is that if you're thinking a lot about your personal style and what is my personal style, if that's a question you're asking yourself and you're really not sure and you're worried that you might not find it, don't worry. First of all, when you're learning watercolor, it's very difficult to apply a style when you're a new beginner. We don't expect, and I'm going to go back to the toddler analogy, we don't expect a toddler to be to strap on figure skates and do pirouettes and twirls and flips across the ice. And so, that's we might, once they start walking, put a pair of skates on them and see them go very slowly. And here in Canada, of course, we all learn to ice skate at a young age. But once your basics are strong, once you can walk, so to speak, you're going to be able to start thinking about technique and applying your own style to that foundation that you have. So it is much easier to think creatively once watercolor techniques start to feel more natural. And when you're learning techniques, your brain is taken up with implementation. So much of your mind has to be focused on getting those techniques right. So you can't really think about your style. That doesn't mean that it's not happening and it's not there. I encourage students, if you're new and if you're learning watercolor, focus on painting whatever you want. Work on honing your technique and building those skills, getting a strong foundation, and then interpretation becomes a part of your artistic evolution as you master the skills of watercolor. Sorry, I'm just feeling a little bit blind here. Good. Okay. Continuing. In fact, and this is something I think is really cool, you can develop your artistic skills and find your personal style without a teacher, without outside influences, without study, just through faithful and persistent work with the medium of watercolor. Although, of course, having some guidance is going to speed the process and hopefully help you stay encouraged when it feels like you're not progressing in the way that you would like. So your personal style is, because it's so internal, it's there already. So as you develop your skills, it's going to start coming out. I do think that sometimes looking at different artists, looking at artists who create in watercolor in many different styles can free you to understanding that, you know, anything is possible. And there are artists who kind of launched me into my current style, to finding my voice in watercolor. Just by seeing their work, it inspired me to be more true to what was in my heart. So that is one role that I think a great instructor and different influences can have. And what I love about developing your individual personal style is that it's yours. No one else can see into your heart and express what you have to say. And that is just thrilling because you're the only one who gets to speak with your voice. And I think all of us will be most satisfied in our painting in the moments when our hearts and our hands are connected and pouring into our painting, our deepest personal expression. And so, you know, if that means that watercolor, when you find that style, you're going to be fulfilled on a very deep and personal level, which I think is so cool and so exciting. And it just makes me want to just explore watercolor and look for those moments when everything's kind of meshing and that magic is happening. So questions about what is my style won't need to be asked if you're making those connections, because you're just going to know. And so that's why I encourage my students to paint whatever you want, in whatever style you want to paint it. All of that exploration and experimentation is going to get you closer to kind of flipping that switch, that on switch where your heart and your hand connect, and fill you with the joy that, with so much joy. But you need to spend time exploring all the possibilities and just trying different things and having fun. So, developing and understanding your style, I really think it just requires two things from you, the artist. Number one is experimentation, trying different things without putting pressure on yourself to succeed, or at least not succeed at all of them. And observation, pay attention and look inward. So notice, you know, almost stand outside yourself when you're painting once in a while and notice what turns you on, what gets you excited, what feels the most natural, what little moments just make your heart sing. And when you look for that excitement, and I guess this observation is both physical and spiritual, because you kind of have to watch your body language, and we're going to talk about that as we move over to the painting surface here. But it's also spiritual. It's that looking inward and seeing what makes your heart sing. And I love all kinds of watercolor painting, many different styles. And I enjoy looking at art by different types of artists. But the paintings that excite me the most have the qualities that I love the most about watercolor. Fluidity, expressive brushstrokes, confidence, and simplicity. So we're going to move on to talking about, so we've talked kind of about the heart connection with painting. And that's just paying attention to what gets you excited. And as you're painting, as you're looking at art, and even in your own personal life, you know, what some artists or some people will tell me that they love the fluidity and spontaneity of painting because they live very structured lives, and so this is their release. And so sometimes it's the opposite of what you might do in your real life or in the rest of your personal life. So we're going to move over to talking about physical observation, and I think body language. I'm just switching now so I can see what you guys can see on the screen instead of reading my notes. Body language tells us a lot about our painting style as well. When I was learning to paint, I didn't have a studio, and so every night I would put a board on my lap on the couch in the living room. And I would have that little board on my lap. I'd have my painting stuff on the coffee table, and I would sit and watch TV and paint every single night for several years. And when you're sitting with a board on your lap and all your painting stuff kind of balanced on your knees, you don't have a lot of freedom of movement. So my painting was very structured, very controlled, because I'm making small movements. I've got a small space to work in. And I'm learning now that over the years, as I moved to a different space, I moved to a craft room in the house and then out to my studio. And all of a sudden one day I realized that chair that I had beside the table wasn't getting used. I was standing to paint. And so my body language changed. And I think for you, you'll notice this as well. When you're learning techniques, you're going to feel your body's a little more tense. Your movements, how you hold your brush. You might be painting from the wrist and just moving your wrist when you're painting instead of using your whole arm and your whole body. And you might be cramped over into a small space over your table. And those aren't bad things, but as you observe that and you're wanting to paint loosely, if your body language is tight and tense, what's going to come onto the paper is going to be, tight and tense as well. So I really encourage you to loosen up. And one thing that I do is just standing. And this is where the camera angle is going to start to fail me here. So I paint standing, and it would be nice if I had a taller counter height table, but I don't. So I kind of lean over just a regular table. And then I also, prop my board up so I have a bit of an angle to paint at. And when I'm painting, I try to use my whole arm. I move from the shoulder and not from the wrist. And I hold my brush, higher up on the handle as well. When I notice that my body language has changed, I'm hunched down over the paper. My hand is clamped down to the very tip of the brush. And I'm moving, my arm movements have gotten smaller and tighter. I know that I've moved from looseness and freedom into, tightness and control. And so that means I'm either working on a detail area of my painting, or I'm getting very tense and I need to take a break and loosen up again. So pay attention to how your body moves. That will give you some clues about your mindset and also how your painting is going to come across. Because without those loose, expressive movements, you're not going to have that same loose feel. So now we're going to move over. I want to show you a painting, and then we're going to actually do a little landscape, a little abstract landscape that is so much fun for me to paint as we talk about brush handling techniques. Just bear with me as I switch my camera over. And I want to welcome everybody who's joined me. I see all kinds of people checking in from all kinds of places, and I want to welcome you all. And let me just make sure I have my camera nice and as straight as I can get it here over my work surface. I think we're good. Reasonably good. Let me see if I can, hopefully I'm not going to make you too dizzy here. Well, that's a little bit better. Okay, I think that works. Okay, so I have a reference photo here, and I have a painting that kind of was inspired very loosely by this reference photo. And I like to have some kind of image in my mind when I start a painting. And now I have an assortment of brushes beside me as well. And you might have seen this. You might have seen this painting on my Facebook page. I posted it there yesterday. And I just can't do the colors justice. Something about my camera does not want to pick up the beautiful, rich kind of golden color. It's a golden rust color of this paint, but it's really beautiful. If you could just see all the subtleties that I can see here in real life, I just love it. Anyhow, these kind of paintings are, I call them abstract landscapes, and they're really fun to paint. And they give me an opportunity to use a lot of expressive brush strokes without having to worry about a really realistic interpretation. So we're going to do some of that. And I want to show you two of my brushes. And as you know, I have a favorite brush, but I get asked all the time about the materials that I use. And the truth is, there's no one perfect wonder brush. Whatever your favorite artist uses, it's most of the impact from that brush is going to come from the user. So you don't need to have a perfect brush in order to have a great painting. I'm not going to use the word perfect painting because I haven't painted a perfect painting yet, and so I think that's an unrealistic expectation. But I have my Escoda Versatile number 10 rigger, and starting to wear the letters off, which means probably I should replace it soon. The bristles are going to start to wear down on the tips, but that matters to me less than it used to, because I like a big brush because I'm working more on loose painting. And with loose painting, you want to work with a big brush, because otherwise, again, we want to tense up and work on those tiny little finicky areas instead of keeping things fresh and loose. Another brush that I have here is my Cheap Joe's Scroggy's Loose Goose, and I had this brush for many years before I actually started using it, and I love it for making very fine lines. And it's got this, because it's so long, it's got a real unpredictable snap to it, which can be really fun, and I'll demonstrate that in a few minutes. For a brush that holds a lot of pigment, I have this Princeton Neptune number 4 quill, and truthfully I bought this brush just because it has this really beautiful wires holding the bristles on, and I'm a real sucker for a great visual, so that was why I bought the brush. But I like the fact that it holds so much water and paint. It just soaks it up, and then you just lays it across the paper. It seems like it goes on and on and on. And then just their standard round brushes, and you guys have seen these before, my Princeton number 10 rounds, and they're both just slightly different models, and truthfully I'm not really sure which one's better. I think probably the Princeton Elite has just a little bit of a nicer shape. You can see this one's kind of straight to the point with the bristles, and this one kind of has a lovely little curve to it. And I always think those brushes hold just a little more paint and have a little bit more nice movement. But when it comes to brush handling, I mean, one brush can do so much. And so we're going to just demonstrate that with a sky-ish wash of paint right now. And I have all my palettes beside me today because I wanted to, I thought maybe if we had time we'll talk a little bit about color mixing. I don't think we're going to have time. One thing I like is with this Escoda Versatile, I can use the side of my brush and just drag it across the paper to get a really nice large stroke that's also a little bit unpredictable, and just by working with the side of the brush. And I often, and that's a good way to fill an area quickly. This bigger brush holds a lot of paint as well, and whenever I'm painting a scene, I try to move in the direction of the way that object would be shaped in the scene. So I'm not sure if I'm describing that very well. If I'm painting trees that are spiky, I'm going to move my brush in the direction of those spiky bits. If I'm painting grass, which I think I'm going to do right now, I'm going to paint my grass using a very strange color actually. I'm going to use this cobalt teal, and I'll show you why in a second. So for this, I might use the tip of my brush, and I'm just working in a kind of a curved diagonal. And with brush, and I want you to notice too how light my touch is. I'm not mashing my bristles into the paper. The tip is just dancing across the surface right now and just barely touching it. And that gives me kind of a broken line in some areas that's really pretty. It doesn't have to be a solid line. And I'm dripping. I'm always a little drippy. I'll do it on purpose here, just exaggerate my drippy shapes and splash a little bit. And a little bit of splashing never hurt a painting, at least very seldom. Maybe when I want a really controlled wash, then I have to be careful not to drip. But just a light curving touch. So I'm using the side of my brush to fill this area, with a little bit of irregularity, and then the tip of my brush to fill this area because I want some of those brush strokes to appear. And now I'm going to drop my brush completely, and I'm going to pull out my Aussie Red Gold, which is right now my new favorite color. And I'm just going to use the point of my tube here and just put some paint right on the paper. And you can hear the scraping sound as the metal of the tube scrapes across the paper. I'm not squeezing out giant blobs of paint, just smears as I move across. And then I'm going to grab my Versatile again and tilt a little bit because I want some flow here, and let this paint join the rest of my painting. And I think and I'm going to use the side of my brush again to kind of smudge it and see what it does. And then the tip of my brush as well to give it some water, some really juicy pigment, and let it flow down. And as that red gold mingles with that cobalt teal, I think we're going to get our green grass that we were lacking earlier. Now the Aussie Red Gold, I know some of you are saying it's not available in your area yet because it is brand new from Daniel Smith. And so I did take a look at the tube, And it has 3 colors that it lists as being part of the mixture of pigments in this tube. It says diarylide yellow, transparent red oxide, and quinacridone red, which actually I looked up the pigment numbers, and it seemed to me that it was more of a violet color actually than a red. So if you don't have Aussie Red Gold, you can try and mix your own by mixing a brilliant yellow, a bit of a rusty red, and maybe something a little bit violety just to tone down that bright yellow. And so you can see the little marks from my tube showing up here, still streaking across the paper, which I think is kind of interesting. But I feel like it needs something more, and I wish I'd brought, oh no, I did bring it, I think. I have some burnt sienna light, which is another new color from Daniel Smith. And I'm going to smudge a little bit of that on too. And this time I'm just going to kind of put a few little dimples of it right onto the, maybe a little bit more up here. And it's, you can see, a little bit darker, and it kind of comes out in this kind of stringy fashion. Some pigments come out as blobs and some kind of have these long strands. Not sure what the difference is there, just the pigments that themselves or the binder, I'm not sure. And then I can kind of smudge that in a little bit, mix it. And I try not to have the pigment, if I'm squeezing it straight from the tube, which isn't really a traditional watercolor thing to do, but I think it can give you some really interesting knots of pigment that can really add to your painting. And but I do try to keep it from being really textural on my paper. So these bigger blobs, I'm going to go in with my brush and maybe add a little water, give them an opportunity to spread a little bit. And let's spatter a little bit again too. And this is a very simple composition. It's just really just a band right across the paper. And things are mingling and mixing here. I'm going to grab that loose goose that I was telling you about. And we're going to create some more brush strokes. And a brush like this, mostly I use just the tip of it. Let me find some more of that. I'm going to grab more of that burnt sienna light right now to create some some interesting lines that kind of match what's already happening on the paper. Yeah, and I'm just going to go right down into these white spaces. And you know, I have the burnt sienna light already squeezed onto a temporary palette here, but because it's dry, it's not coming out quite as dark. And so sometimes you just got to squeeze a little more fresh from the tube so you can work with it. I could just spray it with water and wait for it to soften a bit more, but we don't have that kind of time. Let's just go straight into using it from the tube here. And I'm just going to add a few little strokes here. And with the loose goose, you get a very fine line, which I don't want to use everywhere. This is the kind of brush stroke that is saved for the detail time of your painting towards the end. And I'm just using it to suggest some grasses, or it could be tree roots. I can reach right into this blob of pigment right here and pick up more pigment because it's more than it needs in that area anyhow. And I love the different little variations of color we're getting here. We've got green, we've got rust. The teal is still standing out in little spots. And in fact, let's see how the loose goose does here at spatter. Different brushes are going to spray paint in a different way, so that's another thing to learn, is just which brush has that flick that creates big droplets, which ones are going to be better for creating a fine mist. Actually, the toothbrush is the best for getting a fine mist of color. And these brushes with the long bristles like this really do have a great flick for creating texture. And I'm just going to add a little more water in a few spots as well. And here I'm using the side of my brush again. Rather than switching to a big brush that will fill a large area quickly, I can just lightly turn my brush, and lightly because I'm not mashing it into the paper, using that light touch. And I'm just filling in some of the white spaces because white spaces really draw the eye. and I don't want them to be too dominant in my paper. There's some white spots in here, but I want this kind of band to be a little bit more full, I guess, full of color. Okay, now there's some very cool things that are happening here. I love seeing some of this color that's flowing up into the sky because it gives us this beautiful unity between the different elements in the painting. And my many brush strokes, the way they all have a unified slope to them, they're moving in the same direction. We have pattern there. And then we have kind of a pattern even moving across here with these cloud shapes that are up at the top of the painting. I was a little drippier than I probably should have been in this area. In fact, I'm going to just blot. There's one droplet that's really bugging me here. Ordinarily, I would have tried not to drip quite so much in that area of the sky. I was using Cinereous Blue by Sennelier, which does have, as you can see, it does create those cauliflowers quite easily. It's a kind of a pigment that will allow itself to be displaced easily by water. And then down below we have all our interesting things that are happening. We have texture, we have a lot of shape, and so our eye gets pulled right down into the painting. At this stage you get to let things dry, and then what I like to do is go back in later after everything's dry with some let's call it interpretive dance, taking some paint and hopefully a color that goes along with the rest of the painting. Maybe I'd pick a violet just to help the gold to stand out a little bit more. And it's not dry yet, so this isn't going to work super well. But I might take just a rich dark. This is kind of a muddy violet color. And I might add a few interesting darks and interesting lines. And with my brush, I can do a little bit of sketching and scribbling, which I think can be really interesting. Use the side of my brush to fill an area and then dance out some of that interpretive dance with my brush. And with an abstract painting, you can really give yourself permission to be a little bit nutty with how you move your brush. And if I'm making these artistical lines look really easy to create, and then when you do it, it looks more like a kindergartner trying to do calligraphy, that's just because I've been doing this for many, many years. So the brush strokes you're seeing me create, I've made them thousands of times. And so as you play with finding a way to move your brush, you'll start to develop your own kind of signature shapes and lines that you enjoy and really have fun putting into your paintings. And I think the key is the light touch can help really a lot. That looseness, working from your shoulder instead of, look again how high I'm holding the brush. I'm way up at the tip of the handle. And so I get a freer movement. And those are things that are going to help you to create those loose and interpretive strokes. And maybe you won't be a zigzag person like I am. Maybe you'll be circles or strong, jagged, blocky shapes. That would be fascinating to see. There's so many different ways you can use your brush that would just create beautiful interpretive marks that dance across your paper. And see how those interesting darks just kind of create, they're kind of sign markers. They're pointers to the parts of the painting that I want to showcase. That violet color, because it's a complement to gold, it helps the gold to pop out and helps some of the other areas in the painting to kind of recede. And those darks serve as exclamation points so that you don't need very many of them. Hopefully you're like me and you try to minimize overusing exclamation points. And we try to do the same thing in painting. Add your darks, sparingly towards the end. Okay, I think that's all I have to share about working with brush strokes. You will hear artists say, and I say it now too, how they use the biggest brush that they can when they're painting, and that tip might sound really intimidating to you. I know it did to me when I was learning to paint. why would I choose a big brush when I'm trying so hard to get these details down? So I wouldn't worry about it too much. Part of the way I use my brushes now is the natural evolution of the learning process. And so as you learn, you'll find yourself changing your preferences and changing your approach. And you can watch for those things as you paint and develop, and be encouraged by them, because they are a sign of growth. And so then, and don't feel like you need to be locked into doing things a certain way for all time. You know, it's very permissible and encouraged to try different things and see what works. One thing I haven't done today is pulled out any flat brushes, and I've never really used flat brushes much. And that's one thing I'd like to try, because I know there are many well-known artists who use flat brushes exclusively. So I kind of wonder, you know, maybe I'm missing something, and maybe it's time to give that a try. And so just like you, I'm asking questions and I'm experimenting. And and what works for me changes as my technique and style and approach evolves. I don't like to say changes, because it's more just a natural steps along the journey. I'm going to move over to the questions and see if there's anything I need to answer. I know you guys have been busy chatting over on the chat, and so I always miss taking part in that as I'm teaching. So I'm going to switch the camera over one more time and see if I can answer some questions for you guys. Try to do this without dropping things on the floor. Okay, well, I see Maxine's question, so I'm going to go right to that. Maxine says, once I put color loose on the paper, when dry I don't see anything in it. How do I develop an eye to see? And I know what you're talking about, because I talk about finding things that are hidden in your painting. And it doesn't... I'm remembering a class that I taught once where I had my students do a wash on the paper and then press cling wrap into it. And then after they removed the cling wrap, they were supposed to find a shape and develop a painting out of it. And the one lady, none of us, not even me, we couldn't see anything in her painting. There was just these blocky shapes, and it just, finally we thought maybe we could make it look like elephant legs, and so she painted an elephant. But so when I'm painting that first layer, even though it looks like it's just completely random, in my mind there's always a little hint of something. So Maxine, if I'm putting down that first wash, I might be thinking these are kind of floral colors. I'm going to make round shapes that are going to be floral-ish. And I talk about that in my Lovely Loose Florals course, where we're doing a loose wash, but we're also kind of directing it with a mind for what we're going to make it into. And sometimes it backfires on me. Sometimes I'll be thinking landscape, and then I'll do a wash that's kind of sky and kind of land. And then later I'll turn it and look at it from different angles and realize I see something completely different. Maybe I see just big close-up tree trunks, or I can't really think of what else I might see, but you know, it just changes. So I do kind of direct my first wash with the mind as to what it could become, while still allowing myself to change my plan if I see something else emerging on the paper. So I hope that helps. Yeah, Joe, you've got some questions. Do you want to stick them up for me? If you can here. And what other questions? Oh, I have a question. I see a question from NKNana3. Does the loose goose brush hold more water than the rigger, or am I using it mostly for its fine point? It's a smaller brush than the rigger, so it does not hold as much paint at all. I'm mainly using it for that fine point. I wouldn't use it to fill a large area with color, and I don't use it for the bulk of my painting. That fine tip just makes some really beautiful grasses, roots, tree branches. It's because it's so flippy, that's the technical term, because it's got so much bend to it, you know, it's going to really flex as you're painting. So you can get a really unpredictable line, which I like, because as much as we try to be unpredictable and not really structured when we're painting tree branches or grasses or whatever. After a while, we tend to realize that we've been painting the same thing and it looks like very regimented, like a line of soldiers instead of these branches that are supposed to be organic and loose. And so having a brush that's a little bit unpredictable can really help with that. This brush is from Cheap Joe's Art Supplies. I'm not sure what kind of brushes would be equivalent from other companies. I'm going to have to do some research on that because that's something I'm a little bit curious about. Oh, great. Maxine also asked if the subject dictates my brush choice. More often, it's a good question, Maxine. Really, 95% of my painting is done with my Versatile number 10 rigger. It just it works with everything. And so if I'm painting a really small painting, which I don't do nearly as much of, then I'm going to use a large brush early on and then move to a smaller one as I get into the details. But most of the time this comes to even a fine enough point that I can use it for my whole painting almost entirely. So it's not the subject so much as the size of my painting. Just because I like a round brush. If I were using round and flat brushes, then maybe it would be a subject thing, and I will keep you posted as I experiment, because I really do want to try and see what flat brushes might do for my painting. Maybe they'll inspire me in some other ways. The Loose Goose brush I'm using, I do see a question there, is a number 1, it says. So I think it's one of their smallest ones. And again, it would be fun to try some of the larger sizes. Other questions? Orva asks, what is your opinion about using a water brush? I haven't really gotten to like the water brushes that I have. Maybe if I had a really good quality one, but to this point I just don't, mostly I have a hard time finding one big enough for what I like to do. And I feel like when I'm using a water brush, I still need to have water on hand to rinse my brush with. So I don't really see the advantage of using a water brush over just a regular paintbrush, unless maybe I needed just a very compact kit for travel. So again, I haven't used water brushes very much, so I don't really have a firm opinion about them, except for that the ones I have tried really didn't work for me. Glenda says, I love my Princeton Neptune dagger. That would be an equivalent. I will take a look at that. I believe the Loose Goose is a dagger style brush. So I think anytime if you see a brush that's labeled as a dagger, that would probably be a similar option. So thanks for that, Glenda. Peacetime says, I got a number 10 rigger and was disappointed when I first saw it, and then I put in water and paint, and it holds a ton of paint. It really, really does. And I know if you're fairly new to painting and you're trying out the rigger brush, you might find you don't care for it because you're going to have a little less control than you would with a shorter brush. And so give yourself time. Like I said, I didn't use my Loose Goose for years and years until I found a place for it in my watercolor style. And that was partly just because I had gained the experience to know how to use it and to have a comfort level with that, losing a little bit of control in favor of that more organic line. Great questions, you guys. I love the chat we're having here. I really should be wrapping up. And so I'll take a couple more questions if you have a few more. Oh, thank you. My blouse is, Barb says she loves my blouse. This is actually one of my watercolor paintings. It's my Glorious painting. And I don't have it available online, but I do have a scarf available with this painting on it on my Shop Vita site, and the link is in the description of the video today. I do want to mention that the supplies we've been discussing, most of them are already listed in the description of the video. Anything I've mentioned that I didn't already put on the description will go up in a few minutes after we close the broadcast. So if there's brushes you're interested in trying, paint colors you want to try out, they'll all be listed down below the video. I also want to mention the Aussie Red Gold from Daniel Smith. I've I've just really been enjoying it. Daniel Smith paints are really cool because they do carry so many different colors and the different qualities of them. Some granulate, some are transparent, some are semi-opaque. They call them semi-transparent, but I prefer semi-opaque because it kind of describes what they do a little bit better. And the Aussie Red Gold, what I was going to say about it is next week I want to talk a little bit about mixing color. And so we're going to talk about some of these mixed pigments that I have from Daniel Smith and how you might get a similar result without having to purchase those colors. I know for some of you it's not possible to bring in these colors to your area, or you might just not be able to afford all these different colors that I get to enjoy as a professional watercolor artist. So I'm going to talk about mixing colors and how you don't need to feel like you have to buy all the colors your instructor is recommending. Some of them you can mix on your own, and if you have some of the basic principles of mixing color down, I think you can feel more confident about color mixing and just your ability to get the colors you want without having to buy out your art supply store. So we'll talk about that next week. Appreciate all your comments and you guys taking the time out of your day. Orva, I'm probably not pronouncing your username correctly, but comments, in some exhibitions I've seen gold and silver usage in abstracts. What do you think of using gold and silver in combination with watercolors? I have tried using gold leaf and so far it hasn't worked for me, but I would love to be able to add some metallics into my paintings. And I was eyeing a new product at the art supply store last time I was there at Delta Art in Edmonton, and unfortunately I just didn't pick it up. But it's actually some kind of powdered metallic liquid or pigment that's made into a liquid. It looked absolutely gorgeous, and I want to try some different things. Just to see. Yeah, it's always fun to experiment. And if you're working on a painting and you look at it and go, what this needs is gold ink, put it on. Why not? That's my motto. Let's get excited and find that heart connection. And if that means breaking some watercolor rules to do it, by all means, go for it. Great questions, everyone. Lee, I do this every week. I've been teaching a live lesson here on YouTube weekly since last fall, with a few breaks for holidays and so forth. And I think it's a great way for you guys to get to know my teaching style. It's not as structured as you might find in my online classes, which are at learn.angelafehr.com. But I don't want you guys to take an online class from me unless you trust the content you're getting. Really feel like you know and understand how I teach, so that you don't get surprised when you purchase the course and go through the lessons. With my online classes, each of the lessons is self-paced. You can watch all the videos in one day, or take your time and just savor them and walk through them step by step. I have, I believe, 13 online classes, and each different subjects, different approaches, different exercises to help you make better painting decisions. And that's really my goal. It's not for you to copy my paintings exactly or copy my style exactly. I want you to have the tools so that you can be an artist that's very true to yourself and able to express yourself with confidence and joy. And so that's my goal in my classes and here in my live lessons. And I want to thank you guys for joining me. This video will be up on YouTube here for a week following the broadcast, and then we'll have another one next week. So thank you very much. I want you guys to have a great day, and hopefully you get a chance to paint today. I'm all excited about these new colors and just playing with my brushes, and answering your questions always gets me inspired to try some different things and to have fun with watercolor. So I'm signing off. Have a great day.